Yo, what's up, guys? It's Storyteller. It's me. I'm David. Is this David? I don't know. Do you guys prefer if I go by Storyteller or David? I'm trying to get into a state where I just don't care. Yeah, and that's kind of what's been going on. How you guys? Your day's been going well? Has it been good? Me, it's okay. It's okay. Do you know what I mean? What's it called? Remember to stay hydrated and drink your water. Make sure you're drinking your water. Stay hydrated. I have a mug basically right next to me. I'm just drinking water right now. Try, if you can, try to get like a water bottle so like you can gauge how much water you're drinking in a day. Because I think what a lot of people don't do, we miss out on like how much water we should be drinking in a day because we're not able to document it. Like for instance, I'm planning to run to Amazon probably right now, or maybe a site that's better than Amazon, have a designated thing to gauge how much water I'm drinking. You know, I think that's my new plan. And I'm going to start planning out with you guys. So you guys better get that water. Better stay hydrated. Better be doing what you're doing. Because, you know, it's getting hot. And you got to keep fluids in your system. You don't want to pass out. You don't want to wake up with no energy. You don't want to wake up with bad vibes. Come on. Once again, quickly, first and foremost, we'll talk a bit about the food bank. Food bank proceeds are going well. I'm interested in getting the containers created. So there can be like specialized food bank containers, so it's easier to kind of gauge and carry everything, what needs to be gotten. I believe the supplies for this month, they said they have enough pasta. What they want more of is like toiletries. So we're going to try and double down on that stuff. Obviously, baby formula is always good to get. We're getting a bunch of that. So it's been going well. If you guys have any suggestions for the food bank, be sure to leave them down below. Or you can go over to the Patreon and leave suggestions there, whether that's comments or whatever. But yeah, that's the update on that. Game development is also going fine. I'll show some cool stuff on screen. But yeah, it's been cool. It's been cool. I'm just trying to yeah. I'm just trying to do me, I guess. But yeah, kind of what I wanted to talk about was spawned from game development today. Now, I was writing like the story, right? And a big part of the story, without spoiling things, has got to do with spirits, religion, spirituality, what have you. But yeah, no. What I found the most interesting about all of that stuff was the fact that like I started thinking about like the concept of heaven and hell, to be blunt, and the binary states in which those exist. And I was writing like a parallel between like existing in heaven and existing in hell, at least in a biblical sense, and going to jail for your crimes and, you know, rehabilitation and what have you. Because again, without spoiling too much of the story, a big, as evidenced by like the golden handcuff, right? The main character of the story has been to jail, to be blunt. Only for 6 months, but they have been. Do you know what I mean? And that's like a facet of the story, to be blunt. And it's not going to play like a major role, but it does play a factor into how she feels to the spirits of people being sent to hell. Because the big biblical thing you hear about like heaven and hell is in heaven, there's like a bunch of riches and it's like gold and it's incredible and it's fun, like whatever, right? You know what I mean? I have to I'm gonna be playing back poorly today because I'm prioritizing talking about heaven and hell. But yeah, and so that's a really big thing, right? Those are really big biblical concepts, right? You go to heaven, there's riches, there's gold, you have whatever you want. You go to hell, it's nothing but hellfire and you're punished for your sins. You don't even get to talk to God. You failed, you know what I mean? And God has given up on you. And that like parallel was so interesting to me because it reminded me a lot of the way we see criminals in prison, except in this case it's sinners and, you know, divine judgment, whatever, you know what I mean? And I thought it was just like a really interesting parable, right? Or like just, and I wanted to make like a narrative a bit kind of played around that. And I know it's like I'm probably spoiling a bit of my game in doing this, but I just find it so interesting how even like those binary concepts of punishment and like thingy, like they exist within like religious frameworks also, you know? Like there's no spiritual rehabilitation after the fact. It's just the fact you go to hell. That's it. See you in hell, buddy. You know, you don't get out of hell. You know what I mean? You don't like repent. Because basically what I was thinking was, imagine I spent like, okay, basically I want to pose this question to you guys, right? But imagine you went to hell, right? Just imagine you went to hell, like genuinely, right? Like, and think of it like going to jail. So imagine you went to hell and then like, it's just a bunch of hellfire, you know, just burning in fire all day. No one's told you why you've gone to hell. You're just burning in hell, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, all the awful things I've done. I'm just going to get more mad and bitter and resentful, and I might become an even worse person. And I don't really talk about spirits and spirituality and what have you on this channel. Okay, team, my audio cut out, so we're gonna do that one more time. Basically, long story short, I was talking about how I don't really talk about like spirits and spirituality on my channel that much. And like a big reason is, well, I'm not that like comfortable with it just yet. But I am interested in that stuff a lot, like in my personal life. And I'll say this much. I'm a believer in the idea that everybody has a spirit. And the husk that we like take over right now, it's not really us. Like my body is not who I am. Your body isn't who you are. You are your spirit, and that's why when you die, your body stays, but you go, you know what I mean? Your consciousness, whatever, right? That's who you really are, and that's your spirit, And, now think about it, now obviously I'm thinking about it like that. Now imagine your spirit goes to hell, you know what I mean? There's no like form of spiritual rehabilitation. There's no like, oh man, we're going to help you out, and there's no this, there's no that. It's just you burning in hell. Do you know what I mean? And that's insane. It's insane to think about. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, cool. What does this do for someone's spirit? Does that benefit them in any way? Is this going to help them learn anything? They don't talk to anyone. They don't get to find out why they're going to hell. They don't find out what they did wrong. There's no support system. It's just punishment. And this this written punishment, this punishment narrative is a big thing in a lot of religions, a lot of spiritual practices and what have you. It's like, yeah, if you mess up, bro, it's curtains for you. I hope you enjoy that fire, And I just thought it was really interesting. And the parallel being drawn there is between kind of jail and hell. And even some of the very similar talking points are used. It's like, because obviously when you talk about these ideas, right? And obviously I was talking about this a bit in terms of the game. I was writing it down. I was just like, yeah, that she kind of feels for them in that sense, because imagine God has given up on you. Imagine people have just resigned themselves to the fact that he's sinner, he's in hell, the vibes, man. And they just resigned on you, And I imagine a lot of people that go to prison, whether it's for a couple years, a couple months, or a lifetime, right? That's how they feel. They feel like someone's given up on them. And it's also very important to keep in mind the wording of a lot of biblical scriptures, where they're like, oh yeah, and in heaven there's a bunch of riches, and there's gold, and there's mansions, and there's yachts, and there's all this crazy materialistic stuff. Oddly enough, the descriptions are very materialistic. And regardless of whether that's to help us understand how great it is as human beings or whatever, that's not for me to say. But I do think that's really interesting. And now your description of hell is just fire. You are burning, you will suffer, and you will be put in your place. And it's like, what does that do for someone? What would that do to someone's spirit? Literally, what would that do to someone's spirit? And again, a big part of the game right now is kind of the direction I'm heading in is, how do you heal those spirits? How do you get them to open up again? How do you tell them that there's still a place for them and they can still grow and they can learn, and etc. And that's slowly becoming a facet of the game that I'm really enjoying getting to write about, And I kind of want to get a sense for what other people think, because a big angle you're gonna hear about this stuff is, they're probably in hell, but they deserve it, And these are what you hear about quote unquote criminals. Angela Davis talks about this, criminality, these concepts of justice, these very simple things that we don't really think about, but go a long way in the dehumanization of people. You know what I mean? You are dehumanized by being referred to as a criminal. You are dehumanized by being sent into a prison system where you're exploited, where you're not given a proper place to sleep, where you're not given proper food, and they exploit your labor. You know what I mean? And then when you go back out, it's struck on your record, and it's like, yeah, bro, we know you just did weed, or you're just doing drugs or whatever, right? Or whatever you did. Sometimes it's a bit more serious. I'm not gonna act. And it's like, yeah, bro, but you're not gonna be able to find a job. Enjoy reintegrating back into society. But even imagine that, right? At least you get to make the failed attempt, right? In the concept of hell, at least for as it's described, is you just stay there, and you just stay there bitter and angry, and you're not getting out. You know what I mean? And that's crazy to think about. That is insane to think about to me. It almost sounds very human-like. it sounds like it's based on our justice system and the way we perceive things. And to me, and the way I engage with spirituality, I don't think it's a very spiritual practice to not be forgiving. I don't think it's a very spiritual practice to leave people to suffer. I'm not crazy about those concepts, again, in my opinion. And so part of writing it has also been contending that, but also kind of engaging in why we have these thoughts and how these binaries exist, not only in, our modern day like lives and what have you, this dehumanization, how our concept of justice has been warped, right? Or whatever justice means, right? And how that translates into the way we even engage in spirituality and spirits and what have you. And even the most astute atheist, right? Or whatever, will probably say something on the lines of, yeah, man, you're probably in hell. You're probably burning in hell. You know what I mean? And that's interesting to me. It was just interesting as an exploration into like spirits and spirituality and what have you. As a practice, how is that ethical? Is that the ideal way to deal with healing someone's spirit? How would you go about rehabilitating someone's spirit? Is that, because I would argue, and this is me being just talking out my ass for a bit, like, surely it would be a bit more easier in the spiritual realm. Surely once you've left the baggage of materialism and, being of this world, it would be slightly easier to have a one-on-one with someone and talk to them solely as who they are, not who they're pretending to be, not the mask they put on, but who they actually are, and work through those issues. Surely that would be easier. But instead, what we're told about the afterlife is, if you are a bad person, see you in hell with no explanation, like divine judgment. And it's so fascinating to me, because a lot of like spirituality is about understanding. I've always been a believer in the idea that spirituality is about looking at yourself in the third person, from a third person perspective, and being able to understand yourself. And I've never really like jived with those ideas of punishment and like wrath and like, yeah, man, this is, you're gonna fold. You know what I mean? It's just very interesting to me. Again, interesting concepts to explore, interesting concepts to engage with, and I kind of wanted to get a sense for how people felt to that. Do you feel like those concepts are a bit dated? How would you go about dealing with those sorts of things? And do you think that the parallels between like hell and like jail are valid, I guess? And the binaries in which we engage with quote unquote sinners or unbelievers or criminals or thugs or what have you, and how that like dehumanization process, I guess in terms of like spirits, would be despiritization, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a word that translates. There probably isn't. No one's probably thinking about spirits and hell, but me. But it's like, yeah, that dehumanization process and how that's done through our language, through the way we engage with and dismiss the suffering of others, and how they're supposed to improve. Because it's already been proven as a method, right? That like fear doesn't make a lasting peace. It never does. Telling someone to like, and this is my honest belief, right? Regardless of where you stand religiously, spiritually, whatever, if you tell someone to fear God, they're definitely not going to believe in God. I'm going to be blunt with you. That's never going to work. That wouldn't work on me. I'll be blunt. Because that doesn't tell me anything. You're telling me to be afraid. That doesn't do anything. But for a lot of people, that fear is how you keep people in order. But that's not how you create peace. That's why there's been so much uproar. Do you know what I mean? And there's never going to be a place of spiritual stability in people. I talk about spirituality being an exploration of yourself, an opportunity to look at yourself from a third person perspective, and you're not really getting that if you're prioritizing punishment, if you're prioritizing fear, and these are elements that you're pushing in the minds of the back of people. And that's why when I go to church and I have those experiences where the pastor's like, yeah, and you know what happens after this? Death, hell, watch out, buddy. It's like, hang on a minute. How did we get here? And why are these the methods you're using to get people on your side? You know what I mean? And the common retort is like, well, it's true, so. You know what I mean? Is it bad if we're telling the truth? And it's like, well, we have to even ask inquisitive questions of like, why are these the things we're doing in the first place? Again, without disclosing where I stand, I'm kind of just interested and invested in the ways in which people not only engage in their spirituality, but why spirituality is what it currently is. you know, because I'm a firm believer in the idea that people manifest their own spirituality for themselves, and everybody's relationship with God is personal, and or whatever deity they pray to, and so like that's why it's so interesting, just seeing the way people engage, whether or not those concepts have translated into like spirituality, and whether or not that's wholly positive, especially when we're looking at something that people use to improve themselves or work on themselves. Because ultimately, regardless of how I feel, to the fear mongering, to like, you know, it being weaponized, to be blunt, by politicians, by priests, by leaders, what have you, influencers, whatever, right? Families, and being used for all these awful things. Regardless, I think there's still value in spirituality as a practice, because it's about improving yourself. It's about self-improvement. It's about like examining yourself critically and trying to grow, and looking at yourself, being humble and looking at yourself from the third person. I think there's so much value in that, and there's so much value in that discussion. But when you get that drowned in this like conversation of like punishment, is that really helping? Is that counterintuitive to the whole prospect of spirituality? Just things to think about, I guess. Again, these are things only I'm thinking about. I don't know. But yeah, no, I guess I just kind of wanted to talk a bit about that. How do you guys feel to that? What would you do? It's just, I don't know. It's just so interesting to me. Yeah, it's National Jubilee weekend. My director told me to make like 5 posts. I was kind of annoyed. I was like, look, man, making 5 posts for this, but Black History Month, we didn't get a post. We get 1. I mean, Britain loves their empire. They love the monarchy. There was something that came out recently about like the Windrush scandal, and they were like, yeah, man, like it actually was a racist law designed to keep in, you know, the whites, and keep out people that weren't white or weren't British or right. And it's like, hey, you know, surprise, surprise, dummy. You know what I mean? Like when the government thinks, like, if you look at something the government does, whether it's legislation or law, like there's something they're trying to implement, and they're like, hey, it's gonna be really bad for gay people. It's gonna be really bad for black people. You know, 9 times out of 10, it's being done because of that, or they know and they don't care. So that's something to keep in mind. So whenever you're looking and you say, hey man, like, hey, this is looking pretty bad for the blacks. Hey, they probably know. They probably don't care. Look at the war on drugs. Look at the Windrush scandal. Look at the criminalization of black people. You know, look at Keep Britain White, the campaign. You know, look at the sus law. Look at all this stuff. You know, there's so much stuff that was so insidious. Like specifically, there's so much like to specifically target black people, to specifically target people on the political left. You know, these are things that are implemented for a reason. You know, fear does not make a lasting peace. You know, and yeah, I think I might cap it off there. Thank you guys for listening to me once again with my ramble. Tell me if you enjoy this style of video. I'm enjoying making them. They're a lot easier to make, and they let me get off like some thoughts that are on my mind in, I think, interesting ways. I love YouTube primarily because it lets me talk and like express myself in creative ways, and I don't always get those opportunities to do that. Black people and anime, you know. So thank you guys if you listen to all of this. Thank you. Tell me if you want to see more content like this. Again, I don't always have the time to make content like this. Yeah, it means the world that you support. Stay loved, stay connected, and, you know, stay true to yourself. Love, peace, love, admiration. I love you guys. Keep your spiral spirits up. Drink your water. Do your thing. Take care. Peace.